I'm Tasche, and I beat the often path by taking action instead of talking about it, which is ironic, saying that on a podcast. But I think when we talk about planetary issues, that is quite unusual to some degree. I'm the founder and CEO of CleanHub, and we are investing in waste management infrastructure where there is none to keep plastic out of the environment, out of the ocean. And that's what we do.
Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we showcase unusual success stories to help us see our lives and careers from a broader perspective. My guest today is Joel Tasche, and he's the founder and CEO of CleanHub. CleanHub is a startup that aims to preserve and protect the world's oceans by collecting and managing multilayer packaging, which is a type of plastic that's almost impossible to recycle using traditional technologies. 80% of the plastic waste that ends up in the oceans is so-called flexible packaging or multi-layer packaging. Think like chip packets or sauce packets like the Taco Bell hot sauce thing. You know the drill. He's raised over 4 million euros for his concept so far, getting the support of many, many big brands in the process. He's recovered hundreds of tons of waste from the ocean, and more importantly, he's built a life and career that brings him satisfaction and joy. So here is Joel Tasche of CleanHub. Well, welcome to the show, Joel. Now, in case you didn't know, the theme of this show is talking about it and not taking action. That's why I'm here. So I'm the opposite of what you're doing. But I deeply admire you for taking action. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got started, what it is that brought you to this mission. Just what is your journey in a small nutshell?
I can start when I was extremely young because I do believe that it is important. I grew up at Lake Constance, which is the biggest lake in Germany. And usually German kids start playing soccer or football at a certain age. And for me, it was sailing. So I was a competitive sailor when I was younger, and obviously had an amazing, and I also have to say, privileged childhood. I spent most of my time sailing, being in and around the lake and skiing in winter. So I was always out in nature a lot, and I appreciate nature a lot, which again is ironic because I now live in Berlin. But
I love that city, by the way. Berlin is awesome. Berlin is such a cool city.
It is a fun city, but it has no mountains, so
no,
it is problematic. But then early adolescence came. I turned 18, and suddenly sailing was not cool enough anymore, and I started to surf. And with that also traveled quite a bit. Again, quite a privileged life. I was studying, and during my studies I was always working during the semester, so I can take the semester breaks off and kind of spend the money that I earned during the semester break, and went a lot to South and Southeast Asia, like Indonesia. And already back then, and there was, I don't know, 2012, 13, right? Wherever you would go, you would find plastic. It didn't matter if it was in the ocean when you went surfing. It didn't matter if it was on the beach or if you climbed the volcano. There was plastic pollution everywhere. And I still remember that back in the day, I was even asking the taxi drivers, like, where's all that coming from? Why is that? And there was no clear answer to that. And it continued, right? I continued surfing, and by being part of that subculture, you are automatically very much exposed to the topic of plastic pollution quite a bit. Then I did my master's degree, started a job in B2B SaaS, a fleet management company in Switzerland. Was one of the early employees there, joined them in the seed stage and stayed until pre-Series B, and was kind of the right hand of the CEO, did a lot of firefighting for him. So I saw the entire pain of building a company firsthand, got my first experience. But then again, on a surf trip to Portugal, I realized this is not really what I want to do in the next years. Fleet management is not really what gets me up in the morning, right?
Right, it doesn't motivate you exactly.
Not at all. It was not intrinsically motivated. I felt that my learning curve came to a degree that I can try something by myself. And I really sat down and on a piece of paper wrote down what are things that are important to me. And for me, there was community, like being surrounded by people that you like. To me, there was being at the ocean, being able to do what I like to do, which was surfing, it still is. And at the same time, I felt like I wanted to use this privileged childhood, this privileged adolescence that I had, all the things that I was able to learn to kind of build something that is more important than fleet management. And if you look at all these things, it was obvious to me that probably the biggest adventure that is left for someone on the planet is to start your own company. And if you combine that with something where you can do good, that's what I wanted to do. So I took that decision in 2018, spring 2018, quit my job towards December 2018, got initial angel investment from my CEO from the company. And from there, the entire journey started with CleanHub. And that is a story in and by itself.
I think a lot of people, if they have an idea, they don't know how to get that idea off the ground. They might want to start something that has impact, but they don't know where to begin. How did you start the process of getting that angel investment in the early days?
It took me 3 years.
3 years.
From the internship all the way to finally quitting that job. So I built a trusting relationship with the CEO, Andreas Brenner. And, we're still really good friends. He consults me on all big topics, so he's really my mentor. But then these 3 years led to a 1 week decision where he says, like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
I believe that you find a solution for that. So it was a 3-year build-up phase for 1 year, for a 1 week close.
Yeah.
But then obviously there was a more formal investment round in 2020 where we really raised money, institutional money as well, in our pre-seed and then later on in our seed round.
So did you have the angel investment before you quit your job or after, even though you were working on it for 3 years?
Kind of in between.
In between, okay. So you sort of knew that it was coming. It wasn't a complete surprise. You said, this is probably going to happen. So you felt safe that I could quit my job and at least have something to go with.
Yeah, and I got that safety from my personal savings.
Right.
In the beginning. So it was an entire process, right? I started this thought process in beginning of 2018 and then was saving a lot of money until, and again, privileged life, right? If you work in Switzerland, you can save quite some money within a year. So everything was then kind of from the moment where I took the decision that I wanted to do something by myself, that I wanted to start my own company, to the point when I really quit, I built all that up.
Yeah, that is so cool. And I want to talk a little bit about the problem here. So we all sort of know that plastic is floating in the ocean. We've heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We know that there's an island the size of Texas getting larger all the time of plastic crap floating around in the ocean. But one thing that I noticed from your website was that you make a distinction between the types of plastic. And there's a certain type of plastic that ends up in the ocean most of all. What kind is that?
Yeah, from the land-based plastic, and especially the plastic that enters the oceans in South and Southeast Asia, also Africa, Latin America. The latest studies that we refer to state that around 80% of the material that enters the oceans is flexible and multilayer packaging. So flexible packaging is, for example, if you buy tomatoes and they are wrapped in plastic. This is flexible packaging. Multi-layer packaging is, for example, your chips bag. For the listeners in the UK, crisps bag with the metallized inlay and a plastic outlay. You can't get those materials apart anymore in a physical process. So mechanical recycling is impossible for that material. You can, to some degree, downcycle it. So you can hot press it, for example, into roof tiles or whatever, but you can't really recycle it in the same application, right? And that leads to a big issue because the things that can be recycled, rigid plastics, water bottles, for example, there's a huge informal sector working in India and Indonesia, wherever you go, that collects this type of material because it has an inherent value, right? It's like if you buy a t-shirt from any kind of bigger sports brand by now, it will be from recycled water bottles, which actually is downcycling as well. It's not true meaning of recycling, but you can turn water bottle into yarn, into polyester, and then produce clothing out of it.
So an example of true recycling would be taking, to borrow a German thing, a bottle of Schwarz beer and recycling it for more beer. Or
Yes.
what's the other beer? Radler beer.
Yeah.
Those are the two, right?
With lemonade.
Passing my German test right now.
Yeah. And, the industries that are picking it up are, for example, the beverage industry. So you will find quite some water bottles made from recycled plastic. Funny enough, it's more difficult to do the same thing for sodas. It's because, and this is what people need to understand, right? Nobody puts packaging on the market to annoy anyone or to say, it's like, I want to harm the environment. But it's because we as consumers also got used to a certain way. And before I say that to any critics listening, I don't believe that it's purely the consumer's fault. I don't believe it's purely the corporate's fault. It's a system error
They go together.
We have at play. I'm not finger pointing to anyone. This is not helping at all. But I can also speak for myself, right? I got used to a certain level of convenience. I go to the supermarket, I buy the stuff that I want. I want it to last long. And packaging is always designed to protect the content of something. If I produce, I don't know, if I use packaging for tomatoes, I don't do it just for the sake of making it easy to carry, but it also will mean the tomatoes will last longer. So that means it has extended shelf time, right? It can stay on the shelf for longer, which means ideally less food waste, because this is the worst thing that can happen, right? If you take all the carbon budget to produce a tomato, farming, whatever, put it on the shelf, it rots away. This will produce methane. Nobody ate it. This entire work was for nothing. So if it's protected through a layer of packaging and lasts longer and will be consumed, this is from a life cycle analysis perspective better, right? And now I'm not saying we should wrap everything in plastic either, right? We need to find the right balance and make packaging in general more circular. But
and
we're just opening a lot of threads here.
Would I be right in saying that generally plastic is very hard to recycle? It's almost always downcycled, if anything?
In most applications, yes.
Yeah.
There are a few applications where it works better than others. For example, in detergent. So in the household cleaning applications, there you find it quite a lot. In shampoo, you find it quite a lot. Anything that has to do with food contact is difficult, also for hygiene reasons, right? Maintaining the quality of a recycled product is quite difficult. And this is why in a lot of countries, actually using recycled plastic in food contact is prohibited. You can't do that.
Interesting. All right, folks, if you have been listening to this show and you have never, ever hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or your podcast platform of choice, please, please, please tap that subscribe button, follow, and better yet, leave a nice review. Help me grow the show. If you support the stories, if you like any of these people, if you've liked any episode at all, please do me that favor. Subscribe. It takes 2 seconds. Leave a nice review and help me grow this podcast. That's all I ask of you. And now, back to the show. And the major culprit is, like you said, that metallized plastic, or what we have on here in the U.S., Taco Bell, those hot sauce packets, those little packets of prepackaged sauces or whatnot. Those are the things where there's a layer of plastic and something metal. They're combined, they're fused together, so it can't be done. So I think we've done a pretty good job of explaining what the problem is. Now, how did you begin to start thinking about a solution to that problem?
Yeah. That really came to be when we were in India, because I was sitting with a family there. They are friends of mine, and they own some land in the city where they are. And my friend called me and was like, hey, the municipality is dumping all that waste on my land, on my agricultural land in the end, right? Can you do something about it? You are into that topic and so on. And say, okay, let me come to India and check it out with you, because I was super curious. And we sat down at the dinner table, and I was asking him, like, what happens to the waste? What happens to all the stuff that you put in the bag and that you throw out? And I don't know. I have no idea where that stuff goes. And so we started following that waste back. And in the end, we did end up at the end of the chain in front of that field in the backcountry. And we went there at night, and it was truly shocking because people just put these illegal landfills on fire in the evening to reduce the waste volumes. I can show you images and videos of that. Is one of the worst things that you can do because you produce so much damage to the air, to the soil, because you're leaving toxic ashes behind, right? There's heavy metals in waste that will trickle down to leach it. I'm not sure, you probably never encountered that. I did. When you forget to bring your waste out, you have this disgusting liquid at the bottom of
yeah.
Yeah. And that's,
love that.
Imagine that by magnitude of, I don't know, 10, 20, and all that stuff just trickling down in the groundwater, right? This is insane. And this is not happening once, but this happens at a large scale. Nobody talks about it.
We get a sense of that if you camp out behind a garbage truck. You get a small sense how overpowering and awful that smell can be. Exactly.
And these illegal landfills are also the main source, according to science, for ocean-bound plastic, because these fields are unprotected. They're not covered by anything. And when you are in a country where the monsoon comes, or where you have rainy season for 5-6 months, and plastic packaging is lightweight, right? So you have wind, you have rain. The stuff carries it away into drainage systems, into rivers, and from the rivers eventually in the oceans. And this is all because it's not managed properly, right? It's mismanaged waste in the end. The actual recycling industry works much better in for example, countries like India or Indonesia, right? Nothing that still has value is thrown away, and anything that still has a value will be collected and will be sold. And that was really empowering for me to see, right? The secondary raw material market, or in general, the secondary markets in India are insane. You can sometimes drive along streets for 500, 600 meters, and people left and right will just sell old tires or old, what do you call that? The gear shift parts.
Oh, transmission from cars.
Yeah, exactly. The transmissions. Everything that still kind of works, they find a buyer for that. And the same thing applies for a lot of waste, right? We started talking to the people on the ground and said, look, I realized that you collect certain material. Would you collect other material for me as well if I would pay you for that? Obviously, the unsurprising answer was, yeah, sure, we will do that. And so we started doing that. And at some point, we had the first ton of non-recyclable plastic collected. And, then you stand there and it's like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've collected it, but you're like, okay, still have the same problem.
Yeah, like you genius. Great business models.
You've done it.
Here's a bunch of non.
You're now poor and you have a lot of garbage.
Yeah,
that's a win-win.
So that's roughly how it went down. Obviously, we did think of a solution a bit before that. That was still not profitable. So the thing that you need to ask yourself, okay, if this material can't be recycled, what am I supposed to do with it? And then suddenly your options become extremely limited. And this really depends from country to country. And in the US, for example, you do a lot of landfilling in the US, but at least it's managed, right? Germany, however, we have a zero landfill policy. By law, you're not allowed to put anything on landfills, but Germany has 80 waste-to-energy plants. That means we incinerate waste for the energetic value of it, which, quite frankly, is also not amazing. I'm not supporting that per se, right?
Interesting.
Because what you do is you build these power plants, and they're expensive. They're like 100 million euro. So you create lock-in factors because these things need to be fed. They are subsidized by the state. There's no incentive whatsoever to reduce or to make a more circular economy happening. And the other thing that you can do is you can partner up with the cement industry, which in the end was the way that we took. The cement industry has a huge appetite for energy. To produce cement, I didn't know that in the beginning, you need to melt stone in the end. You're melting limestone, and you need 1,200 to 1,400 degrees for that. And the energy today mainly comes from coal. The cement industry is one of the most carbon intensive industries out there.
I think I heard that recently. It was a shock. Yeah, it's a horrible industry.
Yeah, and that does not only come from the energy need, but also from the fact that the actual chemical reaction of producing cement emits a lot of carbon. At the same time, they are a bit in the dead end as well, because these huge energy needs can't be fed through solar power, for example, right? It's like it just doesn't work. There's very few renewable sources that they can fall back to. Hydrogen is not there yet, especially not in a sustainable way. So they are relying on fossil fuels. And in Europe, again, they are one of the biggest waste sinks, not necessarily for all types of waste, but specifically for toxic wastes like solvents, paint, these kind of things, oil sludge, sewage sludge, certain types of plastic for sure, hospital waste, all this COVID stuff, with the this stuff is destroyed in the end in the cement industry because they incinerate at extremely high temperatures. It's quite a clean combustion, and high temperatures. You know that from burning down a bonfire, if the wood is moist, you have a lot of smoke going up.
Yes.
If it's dry wood, you have a nice hot burning fire. And the same thing applies in the end, oversimplified in the cement industry as well. If you burn at high temperatures, you have a very clean combustion. There's an alkaline atmosphere within the kiln. That means a lot of the toxins and dioxins are destroyed. Long residue time, there's no ashes left behind, and the ashes that are there from minerals, they are recycled into the cement.
And heavy metals aren't escaping this process, like you said. Things aren't coming out that are leaching into the ground. It's all self-contained.
Yeah.
Cool.
But and this is super important to me. I'm not saying that this is a sustainable way of operation, of working, but it is a bridge technology. It is better than sending it to one of those unmanaged landfills. We, to this date, did not come across a properly managed landfill with groundwater security, with covering it up to capture the methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas, right, than carbon, for example. And this is why we are kind of also in the dead end and need to work with the cement industry. At the same time, plastic has a higher energetic value than coal, than the lignite that is currently used. So overall, we do reduce the carbon emissions by up to 25%, but plastic is obviously still a fossil-based material, right? So this is why I'm saying this is not a perfect solution either.
Right.
Ideally, we're getting rid of that material, but this is then the system where I was saying earlier, it is complex. There's no simple answer to that. You can't just say like no more packaging.
We just know that this is better than throwing it in the ocean untouched or burning it with heavy metals coming down.
Yeah.
Today's lesson in building your own Angela Ruiz Robles. Angela was a teacher in 1915, and her passion for education extended far beyond the classroom. As a mother of 3 daughters who also lost her husband, her compassion and empathy for other people was truly boundless. If there's one thing single mothers of 3 children know well, it's that you just have so much free time. What do you do with it all? With tons of overflowing energy and spare time, she stayed up every night to create a new educational tool, developing a prototype of an electronic book called the Mechanical Encyclopedia, and she applied for a patent at the age of 64. Without her invention, you wouldn't have your Kindle, that device that lets you store thousands of books at your fingertips so you pretend you'll read them on an airplane one day instead of binge watching all 3 Hobbit movies again as you drift in and out of drunken consciousness. Her device was a, quote, mechanical, electric, and air pressure-driven method for reading books, unquote, and it even had a crude zoom function. She knew that learning could be more efficient and interactive, and she was way, way ahead of her time. Today, her prototype lives at the National Museum of Science and Technology in La Coruña. Sadly, she died without receiving the funding that she needed, but at least we can now celebrate her achievement. That is a fascinating thing. So at the core of the idea, you pay people in these countries to sort and find this material, and then you take that, collect that material, and then you sell that to the cement industry, who burns it in their incinerators.
We are not paid by the cement industry. They either take it off from us for free, or in some cases we have to pay a gate fee. So we are still making loss end to end, right? It's like collection, sorting, disposal, all cost money. So we are applying the polluter pays principle, and we go back to brands and say, look, we know that you can't just get rid of your packaging, but at least you can take responsibility for whatever is out there. And it's in the end quite similar to what we're doing with carbon credits, but applied to plastic. And I think the important thing to note here is that this is what we're doing today, but this is not where we want to take the company long term, right? It's like we do not intend, and we have that in all our contracts and in our charter, we do not intend to become the energy delivery company for the cement industry. We actually have it in our charter that cement and oil and gas cannot ever invest in cleanup, because we don't want to become the greenwashing vehicle of the oil and gas industry, or the energy delivery company for the cement industry, right? And be acquired for strategic purposes on that end.
Right, just to make somebody look good or feel good.
Yeah.
Like, see, we don't have to worry about it. We got these guys.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And we've always been taught here and also in Europe that you separate what's the recycling from the main one. Now, composting is something that some people do. Very few people do that in practice, I think. But at best, most households have two streams. They have their recycling and they have their waste. Do you think that that is an effective way to separate? Earlier, you mentioned that the wetness of the trash would it make more sense just to have dry and wet versus recycling and garbage? Or do you think the way it's currently structured does make sense?
It depends a lot on where you're located and what the infrastructure is like today. Recyclability depends a lot also on context and on geographic context, right? On an island, somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, where you have no recycling industry at all, nothing is going to be recyclable, right? Because the economics just break. Shipping a bale of plastic back to the mainland to be recycled there, the economics will never work. You need to subsidize.
You're burning fuel. Right? You know my answer in that solution. What do you do if you're on an island?
Yeah, exactly.
You just burn it all. Just burn it all.
Yeah, you need capital input through some sort of subsidy,
right,
be it in the form of plastic credits or extended producer responsibility or tax or whatever to make these systems work. Because waste management itself, with the material input that we see today, is not a profitable business case. Nowhere. But coming back to your question, I do believe that sorting into dry and wet waste is a very crucial first step. If the infrastructure is there, sorting into residue and recyclables and organic waste makes a lot of sense. And then at the same time, right, the consumer is also tired of it. They are tired of the work that they have to put into, even though they are part of the problem. But I can understand that. And then second of all, people overpromise on this recycling thing. You're told as a consumer in the US, whatever you put in the blue bin will be recycled. And suddenly NPR comes out with a documentary and other investigative journalists that tell you clearly, no, this stuff is not being recycled. There's also a lot of it goes to landfill, right? And this is again because the economics of the market break somewhere. And this is where people get tired. This is where people get tired from being lied at. And then they say, like, you know what? Everything goes into whatever bin. I don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I feel empathy for that, right? I would do the same thing if I wouldn't be so deep in the industry and would know that
believe what's the
challenges
point
on all sides, right? It's not easy, but I think that the minimum thing that we can agree on is do not lie. Just do not lie about it and be transparent about your actions. And this is also why we're not making a big fuss about having to work with the cement industry. You know, there's another case, I don't want to name them right now, that recently popped up with a big promise. Everything we do is going into recycling. You can send us whatever you want. It's going to be recycled. And suddenly this stuff appears at a cement plant in Bulgaria. And it's like, what? It's like,
Okay.
I don't want to be lied at as a consumer.
Right. Just say the process about cement. Explain why that is a stopgap solution, perhaps, until you have something better. I want to, as always, give you the last word here. So please let the audience know whatever you want, what they can do to support you, how they can help, where they can find you. So I give you the floor here to wrap this episode up. So whatever you want to say.
Yeah. I think the last statement goes back to what I said in the beginning and repeated throughout. If you're unhappy with the situation, act. It doesn't really matter if it's the climate, if it's the environment, if it's a personal life, but take action.
I can think
of take action.
I can think of no better way to wrap it up than that. Thank you so much for sitting with me. It has been an absolute pleasure. I congratulate you for taking action. It's very thrilling for me to see people like you doing what you're doing. So keep on rocking. And again, thank you for sitting with me. It's been a pleasure, Joel.
Thank you so much.
And with that, the podcast is over.